Great. Well, hi everyone. It's Obi Abuchi here with the Leading from Your Core podcast and Vodcast. This show is dedicated to helping leaders all around the world discover leadership wisdom, stories, and insights that will enable you to tap into the power of leading from the inside out. I'm delighted to welcome on the show today Paul Turner. Paul is the Managing Director, Retail of Just Group, and he is responsible for all of the group's retail businesses in the UK and in South Africa. And previously, Paul led Just Group's mortgage, corporate development, and international divisions. And he is also married and the proud father of two kids who keep him very busy, no doubt. And so, Paul, it is delightful to have you on the show today and really looking forward to our conversation.
Obi, pleasure. Thank you for the invite. Really looking forward to the conversation as well. Good to see you again.
You too. And actually, yeah, just on that note, because for our listeners and viewers, Paul said, good to see you again. Paul and I met at a conference last year, at the end of last year, the Yetunde Hoffman's What's Your Story conference. And Paul's story was incredibly powerful, moving. And I thought it'd be great to have you on the show and just talk about the topic, the specific topic, and we'll introduce it shortly, some of what you shared then. So yeah, very much looking forward to our conversation now. I've introduced you on a professional front, also just personal with your family, but just so our viewers and listeners get to know you a bit more, what else would you like to share about yourself? You know, what gets Paul excited? What are some of the other things that you get involved in other than work?
Sure, yeah, thank you. Well, I've got the young family, as you said, so they're the thing that keep me most busy. As you know, with young kids, they take up a lot of your time, and that's all really good. One thing I've discovered fairly recently, I've always enjoyed running, but I've recently sort of took on the challenge to train and complete a marathon. So I ran my first marathon in Manchester in April and got round, and so I was really pleased for that. Raised some money for some good causes. What I really find of running is it gives space. So I find I can go for a run and start, my mind will wander and I start to solve problems I haven't really started to think about. As you know, I haven't consciously gone out there and gone, I'm going to solve this problem today. I find it's a space, just space for me, a little bit of time away from everything. I don't listen to music, just get out there and enjoy the fresh air and let the mind go. And it's amazing how many sort of things that I come up with during running. Some people say that comes up, they do it in the shower, right? But never works for me. I've never solved anything in the shower, but going for a run, that little bit of time away, I think, and space, sort of good for the soul. I think, Obi, good for the soul. So yeah. So that's the other thing. And I did my first marathon, as I say, just recently, and I've caught the bug, I think. So I'm hoping to keep going.
Wow, that's amazing. The running a marathon is one of those things that it's on my bucket list.
It was on mine for a number of years. A landmark birthday, I think, spurred me into it. But no.
Oh, that's brilliant, and congratulations on doing that. And I'm sure
thanks, it's fab. I tell you the other thing, actually, another story, and I'm sure anyone who's ever run a marathon will appreciate this. The crowd. Absolutely amazing. This is in Manchester, so thank you to the crowd in Manchester. They are so inspiring. You know, they're cheering on total strangers, and I kind of forgot that you have your name on the front of your bib, and so you know people go, "Come on, Paul, away!" And who are they talking to? And remember, it's me. I've got my name on my bib. But when you're hitting that wall, and everyone hits the wall, I think mine was about 20 miles in. And you literally feel, I can't go on another 6 miles. I can't go on. And then you come around the corner and there's a group of people who you've never met before, urging you on, cheering you. It really gives you this boost. And you know, it's just strangers strangers cheering on and giving you energy. There's definitely something in there as well, I think, from a business context.
There's something in everything you've said there about the marathon, just that moment of quietness, and we were talking a bit about this just before the show. We live in a busy world.
Indeed.
We live in a fast-paced world. Things are changing and transforming all of the time. And having that space, I love the way you described it there, of being able to tackle some of those big problems. And it's true. I mean, I do have it in the shower sometimes.
Well done.
But I love walks, and I find that going out, one of the things that I did recently was I changed my watch from an Apple Watch. Nothing against Apple, I've got an Apple phone and all of that, but I just thought I want to go out without devices and just have a good old analog watch so I could know the time. But other than that, I just want to go out and just have that space to think. And it's amazing the different ideas that come up, as you say, when you're able to let the mind wander. And as leaders in particular, that's so important, because I say this to leaders all the time. We're having to make significant decisions. And if you don't have a practice that allows you to cut through the noise and really go to a much deeper level to uncover solutions that you're not just forcing yourself to think through, but allowing nature just to bring those solutions. And
I totally agree. I mean, if you think about the sport analogy, every athlete, you know, takes rest, don't they, and recuperation, and it's recovery time. And I was saying to my wife last night, actually, should we just get our phones and put them away after, say, 7 p.m. at night? And she's a bit reluctant at the moment, but I'm going to work on it. Because, yeah, I think it's just constantly on, and I don't think it is good for us as leaders or as human beings. Let's sort of put that away, you know, and connect in the old-fashioned way.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of research now that highlights the things that take energy away from us and the things that give us energy. And there's, to some degree, a lot of these things they're permissible, they're useful, but when you're on all the time, when you're connected all the time, I love describing it as being connected to the matrix. Every so often you gotta unplug from the matrix and really get in touch with reality, and and then dive back in again. And
completely.
So that's so cool. And the other thing I loved about just your description of your experience with the marathon is those supporters, and you said when you hit the wall, they gave you energy.
Absolutely.
And that's it. We all need that. What are the things that give us energy? What are the things that are taking away energy? And do we have people in our lives that are helping us have the energy we need to just go through life, to be productive, be fulfilled, meaningful in what we're doing? So
I agree, and I think these individuals, of course, are strangers. They have no skin in the game, so to speak. It's truly authentic support, and I would be surprised if they really appreciate how powerful it is. And what a great job they do just being there and giving support to these runners that they've never met before. So again, thank you Manchester, if you're listening.
Thank you, Manchester. Thank you marathon supporters all around the world.
Absolutely, yes.
Done it. Thank you for cheering us on. For me, it's a beautiful moment of us just connecting with one another as human beings. It's no skin in the game, nothing other than I just want to cheer you on because you're doing something great there. So that's wonderful. That's been a fantastic intro already, and already some great insights, and just talking about something that you're doing on a renewal level, which for the leaders that listen to this is absolutely critical. I want to segue into another topic that is amongst leadership, but also just generally in the world of personal development and professional growth. comes back again and again and again. And this was something that you spoke about at the conference. I thought would be a great one to touch on in the show today is imposter syndrome and how that can sometimes derail us as leaders, and how to navigate that and overcome that. So I'd love it if you could just share a little bit of your story and
yes, sure,
how you've had to navigate imposter syndrome.
Yeah, sure, Obi. And sort of the term imposter syndrome, I guess, isn't something that I would have kind of used myself, certainly not at the time, and wouldn't have even been aware of such a thing as imposter syndrome. It's just sort of, looking back with hindsight, you realize this is something that was going on. But the story for me really was coming from a very humble working class background. Both my parents were working class, and they'd come from working class backgrounds themselves. I think I said at the conference, my mum in particular had a real kind of natural talent for numbers, and I think in today's age, with the right support, we've probably been doing a job similar to mine in financial services, maybe being an accountant, maybe being an actuary. But from where she came from and what she was encouraged to do, it was, well, you can be a hairdresser or something like that. And so my parents were amazing and are amazing. My parents are still here, amazing, loving, supportive parents to myself and my sister. And we had an amazing childhood, but from a very working class background. And when I found myself in early stage of my career, and I said this at the conference, there was this moment, and I still recall it so vividly, where I said a word, and I was in a meeting with a group of people, and somebody, without really malice, I'm sure, but just sort of made a bit of fun of the way I spoke, and it felt as if all of the lights were shining on me at that moment. That want the whole floor to open up, and that stuck with me so powerfully, and even to the point that I sort of resented my background and my parents, and how could they have not kind of helped me understand that in this new environment I should talk in a different way, etc., etc. And I made a sort of a conscious decision in that I would never be in that situation again, and so that meant hiding who I was at that point. So trying to fit in with a background that wasn't me, but more importantly, sort of hiding kind of the background of where I was and not wanting to talk about the fact that I'd grown up in a council house from working class parents who hadn't been to university and so on and so forth. And of course, because of that, you end up being not true and not feeling authentic to yourself. And eventually, and thank goodness for this, the realization is and was that it wasn't in spite of that background that I achieved success in my professional career. It's actually because of that background, the values, the love, the security, the really wonderful upbringing that I'd had. It was all of those things that made me me. It wasn't me achieving things in spite of that. It was me achieving things very much because of that, because of my parents and who they were and who they are, the people they are still today. But it's a very uncomfortable thing. And I think we are much better now in professional life at realizing that it's very important that we embrace inclusion and diversity and try to understand that people add value from multiple different backgrounds, and we don't all need or should look the same and talk the same and certainly think the same. And I think for my part, it's sort of having been through that experience myself, really being very conscious of, let's look out for this. Let's ensure we've got an environment and a culture where people can come and be their whole selves, which sounds like a cliche, but it's really what it's about. You go to work and bring your whole self there, and as we know, that achieves benefits for the business, much greater benefits than people who are sort of frightened to bring the whole self to work.
Yeah.
But I didn't know it as imposter syndrome certainly at the time. But particularly in financial services, and it's changing it's changing over time, but sort of 20, 30 years ago, a lot of people had come from similar backgrounds, similar schools, similar universities. And by the time you sort of look at the boardroom table, it was really concentrated within that sort of population.
Sure. Yeah. Paul, hey, thanks again for sharing that. Your story resonated powerfully with me then, and it did just now and does just now as well. When you got to that moment, it was a little bit like a crescendo for me when you said, my success now and the impact that I'm having isn't in spite of my background, it's because of my background. And what a powerful message for us to hear. And especially because you went deeper, it's, the values that you learned, the ideas and the character that your parents helped form in you. That's a big part of the success that you're able to build on now.
Build on's right. It's the absolute foundations. That's right. Yeah.
And that, that's so wonderful, because it's what one of my boys talks about. He's only 13, but he's been talking about the fact that actually life is fair in the sense that it's unfair to all of us in one way or the other. And it would be wonderful if we, we're all born and, all born to royalty but that's just not life, is it? That's a fantasy. And the reality is we all come into the world in different guises and from different backgrounds. But there are things that we can celebrate from our backgrounds that enable us to show up as our full selves, and which is really key. And so I love that. I love the fact that you're able to go back and say, actually, a lot of my success is thanks to my upbringing. I'm curious, for you, this realization, was there a transition that you noticed in your leadership, in the way that, were there things you were hiding? Were there moments where you were holding back as a leader because you were hiding a part of yourself? And what's the difference now that you're showing up more fully? What's the difference?
Yeah, I think there wasn't one kind of one day when everything was held in and the next day everything was whoa. Sure, I think there was one sort of day when it all changed. I think it was over a period of time, but absolutely, if I think about the journey, it was a journey that went from a time where there's a work face of Paul and a home face of Paul, and those two, they were the same person, but they were always different. And because of that, you are holding something back. And when you are holding something back, I think people can sense that, and potentially you can appear aloof, potentially you can appear a bit detached, and I think that did manifest, absolutely. And being just comfortable to be who you are, I think, allows people to relate to the authenticity, and I think that's really important, that people just see who you are and can feel that they know you and have the opportunity to know you, and they feel open to be able to have the same conversation. We recently did we call it a Just Talk. Remember, our business is called Just, so we these sessions are organized by people in the business. They do a fabulous job about this, and they have various different topics and invite various different people, and from all across the business just come together and have a conversation. And they invited me to come along and talk, and I shared the same story that I'd shared with you at the conference. And again, people really responded very positively to sort of go, okay, gosh, one of the leaders in our business is talking about this time of feeling vulnerable. And okay, I didn't really understand that, didn't really see that. And Paul, you certainly don't talk like that anymore. And as you heard from my previous story, but I did change. I consciously changed the way I spoke. I couldn't now talk the way I did at 18. But that was part of that evolution. And so I haven't been able to kind of, I guess, revert back to who I was at 18, but I am who I am now. All of the journey I've been through creates who I am today, and just being very comfortable in my own skin means I think that people can relate to that authenticity. I certainly hope so anyway. I do still see this, and I guess we all do it to some degree. It's part of human nature, isn't it, to form quick opinions. It's part of the how we evolved. It's how we survive. It's efficient. So somebody says something, you form a first impression. And I still come across it, still see it, particularly. And the thing I suppose my antenna is really up to here is the way of speaking, the regional accent, and so on. And so I still do see this sometimes. Somebody talks a little bit differently, and people will go, okay, that is different. But that's what makes us so interesting, that difference. But no, not an overnight change. I think it was a journey. And a journey to really kind of go, okay, very comfortable. There's nothing to hide about who I am. In fact, it should be celebrated.
And I think that's important for people to understand, that it's a process. We're evolving and we're growing all the time. And there are two things that you said that I think so powerful to bring out. One, this idea just that you mentioned just a short while ago of difference. And that difference isn't bad, it's just different, right? And one of the things that came out during the Black Lives Matter movement was comments towards Black people, for example, saying, oh, you're so eloquent, and just saying, but what does that mean? Is that eloquent because I speak with the Queen's English? But what if I spoke with a more sort of African accent or Nigerian accent? Does that make me less eloquent just because it's not with a specific type of accent? And so just understanding that difference doesn't mean one is better or one's worse. It's just different. And
spot on. Yeah, absolutely.
They celebrate that and recognize the value of that and the value of those perspectives and contributions and cultures and all of that. Being able to celebrate that, I think, is really key.
I think so, and it's unconscious bias at times, but again, I think there's a part of it is how our brain is wired, in my view, to as I say, get to a conclusion quickly. So if we're trained by culture to think the Queen's English equals articulate or equals intelligence, then that's the quick way the brain works. Okay, that's what that equals. Indeed. But being aware that that's the case, and there may be some unconscious bias there, I think draws that out, and people can then be conscious and actually know, okay, this may be going on, and I need to correct for that.
Indeed. Yeah. And the other thing I wanted to just draw out that I thought was really powerful is this idea of the vulnerability that a leader demonstrates and displays. I was having a group coaching session yesterday with some young leaders, and one of the ideas that emerged was that it's really important, especially for leaders, that when there's a moment to demonstrate vulnerability, as a leader, go first. When there's time to make a decision, as a leader, do your best to go last, because your vulnerability helps other people say, oh, it's okay. It's okay to say, I'm feeling this way. It's okay to say I'm struggling with something. But when it comes to decision making, draw out the other people and allow them to go first, and really give them the opportunity to speak up. And so really critical that leaders are able to do that, because if all you do is show strength as a leader, then that shuts people down, because it just isn't reality. And what you're doing by sharing your story is you're sharing reality and giving people permission, whether we like it or not, where we don't realize it. By not talking about things, we almost make it taboo. But when leaders are vulnerable, you're essentially saying, I'm giving you permission. I'm giving myself permission to be me, to be real, to be honest. And therefore that gives people around you permission to be real, to be themselves, and to be honest. And then that also creates psychological safety, because then you think, well, it's okay for me to be honest and show up. And before you know it, you're wanting to give more of your best because you're not feeling hampered by all of these subconscious and invisible barriers that you think are being placed around you. So
I agree. It's one of the interesting things about being a leader, isn't it? You have this, this badge, or there's a hierarchy. So that you're treated and seen differently. You've got some people describe it as, you cast a bigger shadow, and this is what you are describing here. If you act in a certain way, then that's the signal that this is the way people act around here. So if you are the heroic leader who never shows any weakness, that's what people believe they need to do to get on. And I think that is a somewhat old-fashioned sort of way of thinking about the leader, and I do see, unfortunately, many more leaders who are really more open to say, hey, no, I don't know, or I'm feeling down today, or it's not a great day for me, I'm not really in the flow today, it's not working, or this is something I'm struggling with. And as you say, giving people the permission to help as well, and not feel that there's only one person who has to come up with all the answers or the solutions. But I think it is that shadow a leader casts that you do need to be aware of, even if you are in a position where you see yourself as a supporter and a sort of a servant to your team. Nonetheless, once you're in that position, people look to you for clues on how people behave around here, and you set the culture as a leader.
Indeed, yeah. And some of the work that I've done on imposter syndrome, and even for myself, just experiencing that, and in large part, so that the way it showed up for me is I was born here in the UK and then went back to Nigeria when I was 7 and lived there for 10 years, and then came back to the UK when I was 17. And I had this really weird experience that in Nigeria, I would look around and I think these are my people, but I don't feel at home because I've got a bit of more of a Western mindset in a sense. And then I came back to the UK and I thought, okay, I feel at home, but these are not my people. And so I felt like an imposter everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm in Nigeria. I feel like an imposter, and I'm here in the UK. I feel like an imposter. And I've had to do a lot of work over the years. And I one fundamental thing, underlying element of imposter syndrome is fear. It's fear of not belonging. It's fear of not being accepted. It's fear that people will think you're just not good enough. And I've
fear of looking silly.
Fear of looking silly. All of that, right? All of the fears it feels. And just over time, just learning to be comfortable. I've had to learn to be comfortable with this balance, with this transnationality of, well, I'm not fully Nigerian in a sense, but I'm not fully British, and that's okay because I can still connect. And so that gives me a unique perspective. It gives me a strength that I can draw on. And in those moments where I feel like I don't fit in, that's okay. I just accept that as life, but no longer defining or allowing those fears drive and control how I show up. But it is a journey.
I had a similar experience, Obi. I'd lived in Australia for 8 years, so over there I was the Pom, as they call you. And when I came back to England, I'd picked up an Australian twang, and so I was the Aussie. So I do know how you feel. The other thing I found interesting, though, in sort of listening to you there is I think that if you look at children, particularly children to perhaps the age of about 7. Something happens to them around about that sort of age, 7, 8. I think it typically is, where they suddenly become very self-aware, and their peer group, their friends, become the people they're very self-aware around, and all of those things that you described around sort of fear of not fitting in, fear of standing out, fear of looking silly, are suddenly switched on then at that age. Because if you look at younger children, they have none of that, do they? They're wonderfully and blissfully carefree, and they don't care about what anyone sort of thinks. But suddenly, that sort of friendship group becomes all important, and something happens, and I think we carry that, really carry it with us as we grow up, and that fear of not fitting in, I think, is something that fundamentally comes from childhood.
Yeah, it does. And I think of it as a journey of growth and maturity, because we start off quite dependent and we're very childish in our behaviors, and then we become independent, where we think, hey, I want to do my own thing, but I really want to connect to my peers. And maturity is that interdependent, where I can connect with people, I can want to belong, but I can also just accept who I am and know how to hold my own space, really, both as an individual and as a leader. So
it's a journey. Yeah,
it is a journey, and some incredible points. I think just the idea of learning to be vulnerable, share our story, and realize how people appreciate that, and that helps you show up as a leader. It's one of those positive cyclical catch-22s, in a sense, that the more you show up, the more authentic you are, the more people appreciate that in a sense validates and enables you to show up more authentically next time, which is an amazing thing. So I would love to wrap up with a question to you, to your younger self. So the 18-year-old Paul, if you were to sit down with him now, what would you say, given all your understanding now and your perspective and everything that you learned, what would you say to him about, not necessarily, imposter syndrome per se, but just navigating life with this lens of being at peace with who you are?
I would say to my younger self, be proud of who you are and where you come from. But I realized my younger self wouldn't really listen. So, because you can't put that experience on young shoulders, can you, Obi? We have to experience it. But I'd love to go back and say, hey, this is the great foundation. You've got everything you need here. There's nothing to be ashamed of. There's nothing to feel that you have to hide. It's all great, and also as well, I think the other thing is that you feel in those situations where you potentially feel you don't fit in and you're being excluded. I think the other thing I would say to my younger self is, a lot of that is probably how you see it rather than how it's meant from the others. Yeah. So I think that sort of moment that I remember so vividly, I don't think the other person meant any malice from it. But it's sort of it really went deep to me that I didn't fit in, and so it is for people to kind of appreciate the impact they can have on others. But also to my younger self, I would say, hey, don't take it so seriously. But as I say, I wouldn't have listened.
Well, yeah, I think the amazing thing about that is, even though you wouldn't listen, I think it's still a fantastic message for a lot of our viewers and listeners, because psychologically we can at least tell our younger selves within us that actually it's okay. One, don't take it so seriously, celebrate who you are. There's so many incredible things about you, about your upbringing, that you can leverage, and rather than seeing some of these things as blockers, they are a lot of our setbacks actually set us up for an incredible.
Oh, so true. Yeah, so true. Yeah.
So that's a powerful message. Paul, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you
for sharing it to our listeners and viewers. I loved hearing it again. I think it's a powerful one, and I know that a lot of people will get a lot out of listening to it here. So, to all our listeners and viewers, I know for sure you enjoyed that, got a lot out of it. hope you were taking notes and speaking to the younger self within you. And remember that if you want to be a courageous and resilient leader, if you want to live life on purpose and with purpose, then it starts from the inside out. Have a great day. See you on the next show. And Paul, thanks again.
Thank you, Obi. Thanks for the invitation. Great.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.